Something really fascinating about the development of the original Star Wars film is the origin of Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. Darth Vader flies a TIE Advanced X-1, a next-generation TIE fighter that canonically has shielding and hyperdrive, putting it far beyond the capabilities of the standard Imperial fighter. This unique and iconic ship somehow manages to look both sleeker and more tank-like than the standard TIE fighter. It's the perfect ship for Darth Vader and really makes him stand out in the final battle. But this was not always the plan. In fact, far from Darth Vader having his own unique starfighter, the Dark Lord of the Sith was originally intended to fly a completely standard TIE fighter. We can see this all over the early storyboards, where Vader's ship is clearly meant to be a standard TIE fighter. But in a hectic battle with rapid cuts, having the main villain fly a standard ship would obviously be confusing for the audience to follow. So similar to how the Rebel pilots would eventually get redesigned helmets to show their faces better so we could tell them apart, it would seem that some attempts were in fact made to help Vader stand out just a bit more as well. But the Star Wars team didn't jump immediately to giving Vader a completely new ship. The first steps were a lot more minute. This possibly started even before the TIE fighter design itself was finalized, with Vader's ship sporting a subtle shape that isn't present on the other two fighters. Now that's not much in terms of evidence, but the concept of a marking of some sort denoting Vader's ship is further supported. Take a look at this photo, which circulated for a long time with no accompanying explanation. I myself pondered this image for years. I never remembered seeing this sort of red decal. Not in the films anyway. Could it be an expanded universe thing? It would pop up as an included red pentagon detail in an official model kit, namely the Fine Mold's 1/48th scale TIE fighter, but there was no explanation there either. So I really just didn't know, and I kind of just filed it away in the back of my mind. But then I read a really cool book called Creating the Worlds of Star Wars 365 Days. This book is jam-packed with some really cool photos and a ton of great behind-the-scenes information. And lo and behold, in this book is this photo, along with the explanation that this fighter was intended to be Darth Vader's, seemingly differentiated only by a single red decal. It's not clear how long this possibility was pursued, but ultimately George Lucas would make the decision to radically redesign Vader's fighter to make it abundantly clear which ship the main villain was flying. For inspiration for this totally new fighter, the artists apparently looked to a TIE variant that had already been designed very early in the Star Wars development process, a TIE boarding craft. At the time of the ship's conception, the story was radically different than the final version, and eventually the boarding process that we got in the final film would happen largely off-screen in the ventral hangar of a Star Destroyer, so the TIE boarding craft was ultimately scrapped. It was consequently fair game to inspire Vader's new fighter design. The bent wings of this boarding craft would be used with a completely new hull, but it would still use a standard cockpit ball to match the footage of Darth Vader that they had already shot on the standard TIE fighter cockpit set. According to the available evidence, this photo represents an early stage of development for the new fighter, and this is pretty cool to see, not just for the novelty, but also with its more forward wings, it kind of suggests some early design DNA for the Interceptor variant that would be designed years later. I don't have any confirmation of that, but I do wonder if there wasn't some influence there, that is beyond the bent wings. But at some point, the wings would be repositioned and some other details would become more refined, and they would finally arrive at the version we got on screen. So that's how we got Vader's iconic fighter. But this story doesn't really stop there, because while Vader's ship mined inspiration from the TIE boarding craft, we would in fact get a TIE shuttle on screen in The Empire Strikes Back, but not before the original TIE boarding craft design had already been repurposed as the TIE bomber. So consequently, when we finally got a TIE shuttle on screen, it itself had to undergo a redesign to differentiate it from the bomber. But this would be a pretty quick redesign. It seems all they did was flip the wings so that the bend goes outward rather than inward, just enough to change the profile for a quick shot. So it really turns out that every TIE design in the original trilogy would seem to have an interconnected history. Anyway, that was ultimately just a bit of fun trivia that I wanted to share. It's just so cool to see how everything was developed and how designs informed each other as they made their way to the screen. Star Wars already wasn't created in a vacuum. It's informed by a ton of influential works, but even within Star Wars, things were changing and leaving their marks on each other in really interesting ways. I hope you all liked hearing about that, at least as much as I enjoyed researching it and making it. Before I go, I'd like to specially thank those of you who support me on Patreon. Your support means the world to me. And to the rest of you, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.